Okay. Hey, Terry, I got Matt and Jordan's gonna and Tanner's gonna show up here in a little bit.
Okay.
Just to see this a little bit. But I mean, I don't all we got.
Get it started.
I'd say you can go on, get started anytime.
Okay. Well, just
All right, guys. You know, I know there's probably not going to be a whole lot of guys on here today because, you know, everybody's starting to dry out a little bit, but we're pretty excited here. We got Danie Bester from South Africa gonna talk about soybeans. And, you know, we was down there at Danie's farm about 2 weeks ago. They're cutting beans now, I think. You know, I was amazingly surprised. Now, Danie, don't take this the wrong way, but of how good his beans looked for the resources that he has. What I'm saying is, you know, he don't have the access to all the special fertilizers that we have. You know, the quantities and the quality of stuff. So, you know, when we was down there, this guy is the real deal. You know, back in my mind, a couple years ago, I was thinking about trying to get Danie to come on and help us on the soybeans. You know, and we were out there, like I said, I'm 100% confident in everything he says because I seen it with my own eyes. You know, we appreciate Danie taking time. You know, he's in harvest right now to help explain and teach us about soybeans. So, Danie, don't talk African. You have to talk slow English to us Americans, you know. So have at it, buddy.
thanks, Kevin. Yeah, so I'm gonna try and do my best. But I think I must have to start out with just saying that remember, it's always the Americans talking funny, and because the Americans don't know how to use the metric system. But we will overcome that in the near future. We will teach you how to go to kilograms per hectare and stop that bushel per acre shit. But yeah, so no, thanks. Thanks, Kevin. So I think what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to just tell you know what my approach is, what I'm following here by me on the farm that's been working, and you know the way that I see soybeans. And I think, Kevin, yes, like you said, I just want to give you know a background about you know the soybean production here in South Africa. So here in South Africa, we're still on Roundup Ready 1 genetics. So we are a bit behind the rest of the world when it comes to, you know, genetic potential. But I think we are doing like a really good job, you know, with the Roundup Ready 1s that we do have. Yeah. So the growing season that we have here, we don't get like, you know, a winter snow. We start out with drier. We wait actually for a lot of moisture before we can start planting. So yeah, okay. At the place where we at, so we plant maturity groups from the shortest that we do have is a 4.0, but they're really scarce now. Then we get to a maturity group 4.6. That's more like the more common, faster, shorter stuff that we plant, and then it will go all the way up to a 7.4. So there are some really, I think one of the big things that I know is I think in the US you are planting way shorter maturity groups than what we are doing. So so that's you know one of the big things, and just some background. Yeah. So just want to get my slide to move on. Yeah. So so soybeans. Well, on this first slide, you know, soybeans is one of those things you can try and throw a bucket at them and you'll get nothing, and you can give them nothing, and then they'll just work. But sometimes if you do like just the basic stuff on a bean, it might be better productive than doing, like a lot of stuff. Why that works, I think it's like the math on that board. I showed that slide on the Farmers' Day that we had here as well. And I think if you understand everything on that board that's written down, then you might understand some soybeans. And we're also with coming back to understanding, I just want to add here that in some of my slides, some of the numbers that I'm giving, those numbers I have noted it down. Some of them is in metric units, liters per hectare and kilograms per hectare, and not in fluid ounces or imperial units. So I just want to add that. So that's almost like the same that I'm getting to, understanding soybeans. So the big bean plants that I've been planting the last few years, I've been learning quite a lot, from them. So and every time that I think, oh well, now I've got like a silver bullet, then they'll just throw another curveball back at me, because soybeans is more full of shit, excuse my English, but that's a direct translation, than maybe what your wife might be. I think it's easier to understand a woman than to understand, like a soybean. But if you start to look at what is going to influence your yield now, I think some of this you might have seen, and quite a few guys, they will say, well, if you understand this, you'll understand beans. But there's a reason why they are saying this. And I think almost in the order that they are down there now, that I put them down, nature, Mother Nature always has the last say. You can do what you want. If you're not adapting to nature, if nature is not playing with you, you're not going to get any success. I think like 60% of your success is going to come from what the weather is going to do. So one of the big things usually is, I think, with earlier planting, and earlier planting, I would like to add and put it down as that is one of the things that has to go with nature, because nature will allow you to plant early or not. And that, unfortunately, early planting is like one of the biggest, I think, things where you can gain some yield. Yeah. And then apart from that, here in South Africa, and even on those big soy trees that I grow, the variety, I think that's the biggest thing you've got that you can manage, is getting the correct variety. The variety is really important. And then, fertility. I think with everything, whether it's corn or sunflowers or soybeans, fertility is like one of those things that you have to understand how fertility in soil works to get, yield out of anything that you're growing. Seed and population, definitely that's like, one of the hot topics that I usually talk to when I get farmers group here on my farm as well. I've got a few slides on that as well. Now, planting date, that actually should have gone up all the way with nature on top. Early planting will always win later planting. That's just how it is. And then the planting process, what I found with my trees and even on all my high yielding beans is, I think there's a lot of stuff happening when you put down that seed. Happening from the seed touches the ground until they emerge and get to V2, the V2 stage. So if you're going to miss, you're building quite a lot of potential, theoretical potential has to be captured when you put down those seeds up until when they emerge. And if you miss that window, you've missed it. You're not gonna add yield. You have to save yield from the time when the seed hits the ground. And then management throughout the season for the beans with me, planting is really important, and then just keeping the fields clean up until the last 5 weeks of a bean plant's life. That's where the practical part of that theoretical yield potential that you have, that you need to, that's where it's made or broken. So Mother Nature, rainfall, I prefer to get a wetter start than a dry start, just because of the getting those seeds to germinate, the osmosis, and getting that seed into second gear when they hit the soil. Making sure that you've got even moisture. That is, I prefer a wetter start to the season than with a drier one. And then later in the season, if you've got a good root system, all the way from a dry R1 to R3 and even later, I think those good roots, you can go for quite a long while without any rain. Those beans will go and look for moisture, deeper in the profile if you've got some good roots. Temperature wise, what I found is that I think with the same with corn as well, you need to get just an increase in temperature from germination. If you're going to go backwards, colder temperatures, that's not definitely gonna help. Getting potential, there's a lot of stuff that has to happen. I try not to plant when it's colder than 50 degrees Fahrenheit. I hope I've done the correct conversion on that. So above that, I would prefer, even for higher yielding stuff, it has to be above 50 at least. But you can get away with below 50 with a good seed treatment. But then some of those seed treatments, they will pull back some yield potential. And then the R stages, going above 80 degrees Fahrenheit, those bean plants, they will cut down. There's a lot of, if they don't like to function above 80 degrees, if we go above 80, those plants, they are C3 plants, so they don't know, they can't slow themselves down, they can't handle the stress. It's like me in planting time, I can't handle the stress. I think the same with the beans, yeah. And then, but the big thing, sunshine, and it's not like actual the rays hitting, but the amount of sunshine hours that you're going to get since you've planted, and that's where early planting comes in. The more sunshine hours you can get, the higher the yield potential will be. Now, then getting to varieties. So here in South Africa, we will take a maturity group, and we will pair that to like a certain type of management that we have. And what I will also do is I find that the shorter maturity groups has got a higher potential than the longer maturity groups. But whichever variety you're going to pick, you have to manage it according to that maturity group. And the variety has got like, for me, it's like the biggest influence on my the yield potential. I've got a graph down there. This is a chart that we've done 1 year on a specific field. And there you can see what the yield difference was between the highest yielding one and the lowest yielding one. And like the lowest yielding one is like one of the varieties that is commonly being advised from the seed guys, to plant. So variety plays for me the biggest role and influence on getting the most out of what you can do, because every farmer's yield potential, yield management and stress management throughout the season is definitely gonna have a big impact on which variety you have to choose. So for me, I do try to plant 22 different varieties every year to make sure that I've got the correct one. Because if you fail on the variety, it doesn't matter what you're going to throw at it at the rest of the season, or even how hard you started out, you're not going to get that potential. And yeah, like I say, it's going to differ from the different levels of management that there is. And like in Brazil and South America, you've got low fertility and you don't feel shit for managing your beans, just go with a long one. A long maturity, it'll just hide the shit management that you have. It'll cover it up and grow, and you hope for the best, yeah. But if you've got high fertile soils with high biological activity, the shorter maturity groups, I think, is definitely the way to go. You go in with early planting, you're going to get the max out of it. So one of the breeders in South America that I've talked to, so he told me If you go with you take like a really short maturity group, and that's where the most potential lies, and then they will breed that and cross it with a longer maturity, get like an independent type in the middle, but the hardiness comes from the longer maturity. So definitely you have to place the right variety according to your management. If you've got shitty soils, just go with the longer maturity. That's what's working here for us. Well, then fertility, I think that is, if you've got the right variety, then you have to make sure that you're going to get probably the most out of it. So this is where I think a lot of stuff comes in. I think the most guys will just go out with the regular, if we're at the 66% base saturation of calcium, they're going to be, well, that's it. We're more than happy. That doesn't affect any of the yields on the soybeans. And I aim for that 6.5 to 7.2. I've got some soil samples in here. And I'll show you, and that's where beans like calcium. You have to have a lot of calcium there. If you want to get those flowers retained, you need to have a shitload of calcium in the soil, even free calcium. And then magnesium as well. Magnesium is important for soybeans, but not in the soil. If you want to, if you're going to come short on photosynthesis, you have to go with a foliar magnesium, but not in the soil. Sodium, that's just like corn. Zero is always better. Any sodium or salts that you're going to get, that is really, I think it might hurt your yield more on a soybean that is going to hurt your yield in corn and corn plants. Potassium, 5 to 8% is what I aim for. I see that I'm getting a bit more potassium into the plants as well, getting a bit higher saturation. I have had some fields where I've went too high on potassium, and well, that's also not good as well. Beans, they like the higher potassium levels. On our soil test here, 200 parts per million. That's like the lower end. Going with like 120, 160, doesn't matter what the soil CECs are. You need at least 200 parts per million to get, for me to get the highest yields that I do have. Phosphorus also, those plants, they need a whole lot more phosphorus than what I think the traditional recommendations are. Yes, and I don't go, if it's lower than 50, then I will put down phosphorus just to get it up. But my fields at the moment, luckily, I don't have stuff that's that low. And we've seen some on my friend Johan's farm. He's also got good soils, and that actually the P levels that he had was his limiting factor. And we banded some P, and we got really good reaction just out of banding some P. And he was at like the mid 40 to 50 where his levels was. And then importantly, boron, the boron and the molybdenum, those are like the two most important things for me. If I have to take out everything else, I'll take out everything else, but boron and molybdenum, that's where I'm getting really good, getting that plant to express itself. And I like to prime my soil before I plant. I use just regular, Solubor. I'll spray that out just before planting, and that helps me a lot to get those plants up. And then the molybdenum, I don't know why. I'm not a scientist, but getting that molybdenum with cobalt in furrow or even on the seed if I have to. In all the trials that I've done and all my trees, as soon as I take out molybdenum and cobalt, I'm not getting the amount of nodes and flowers that I should. So in molybdenum, I really give a lot of attention to that. So here is some of the levels of one of the fields down here. That's also some of my better yielding fields. So this is, I just have to add the labs that I've used, that I've sent this to as Envirotech. That's a laboratory here in South Africa that we use I have sent some samples previously to Brookside. That's the only lab that I could have had access to, but I was struggling to find any good, or I'm not struggling, I was questioning some of the results that I've been seeing there because they were out of line with what some of the stuff that I've been sending to Envirotech over lots of years, what I've been seeing. Yeah, so, but yeah, this is 2019 to 22. We're going to be sampling again 2 weeks time from now. So, but that's where the levels are at, where I'm happy with that I'm getting quite good yields out. So we've got low sulfur is one of my limiting factors. That's why I do add some sulfur in furrow and even over the top if I have to, but more for a burn. But sulfur is one of the things that I have to give a lot of attention to. So, but apart from this, what the soil level says, what's important for me as well that has to be in the soil, that there has to be a lot of carbon. Beans will eat carbon like I eat my steak. I don't stop if I start. I like a lot of steak. Beans like a lot of carbon. And then the biology. If you don't have a high active biological system, you're not going to get nutrients into those beans. And those beans, those stems, they're like straws, and every straw has to feed, like the pods on those stems. So if you've got a thin stem, like a thin straw, and if you've got low biological activity, you're not going to get them to suck the nutrients out of the soil. And you have to get nutrients from the soil into the plant. Foliar feeding a bean, that's not going to work. Not getting up to high yields. And then anything that I use with salt in, that's definitely putting a yellow flag on what my yield's going to be, at the inside. So my fertility strategy that I try to explain to everyone that I use on is manure is definitely important. I prefer the layer manure. It works really good for me because of the extra calcium that I'm getting from that. I try to apply between 2 to 3 tons per hectare. Yeah, and so like I said, beans like to poach fertility. So I try to spread out that manure also, as quickly as possible as we can get it and get it. I no-till. I do mostly no-till. So I keep it on the ground. But if I have to do some tillage, then I'll take a red tractor and do proper tillage, not a green one. On some of the degraded soils, there will be some reaction, to potassium and phosphorus if you ban it. But then we try to keep to low rates if we have to add it. Yeah, and then if we have to ban on the planter, we'll just move it away a bit further so that the roots will still reach it, but maybe at a later stage, because I don't want that salt really close. But on the in-furrow is where I'm finding where I can get the most magic to happen, because there we can get the most genetic expression from those seeds to get them up. Because like I said, there's a lot of stuff that's happening from when that seed hits the ground to when it emerges, and if you miss that window, you miss it. So if there's any place that you're going to influence a bean, for me it's that little window there, when I put it down in the soil and put some in-furrow nutrients or biology with it. Yeah, and then I use higher water rates. 10 gallons an acre, I think that's about 100 liters per hectare as well, if I did the conversion correctly. Also, just to dilute everything that's in that, in the in-furrow mix. And I will even go up until 20 gallons per acre if the soil starts to get dry, just for that extra bit of water. Beans like to, and also they need a lot more moisture to start to germinate. And here in Africa, we get really bad sun, so you can dry out soil really quickly. And I've seen that, going from 10 to 20 gallons can make a difference on the final stand that we're having. What I'll put in furrow, some humics, some also sulfur, because for me sulfur is a big thing, and then zinc, cobalt, moly, and then the rhizobium. Our soils are naturally low in rhizobium, and I think doesn't matter where in the world you are, fresh rhizobium on the seed always has a has a place to go. You have to put it in, yeah. And then the thing with the in-furrow, I think you've heard previously from a few guys also, the cotyledons, you have to keep them on the plant. So yeah, that is like a true thing. If you can keep those cotyledons on the plant as long as possible, then you're not using up any energy in that plant. It's not using the energy from the cotyledons to manage, something that it's not happy with. So if you keep them on, as soon as they start to fall off, then you have to go and take a tissue test or just note down why they've fallen off, because that's usually what's keeping you back on your yields. And then if you take your tissue test and see what's a limiting factor, or from your soil test, then you have to address that in-furrowly, and that usually the cotyledons will show you if what you're putting down in furrow is what it's going to need. So that is something that you need to fine tune. There's no silver bullet straight through in furrow, I think, for everyone, because the way that beans react to what's in your soil when they germinate, and what's keeping them from taking losing the cotyledons. And foliar applications, I can't get you. Well, you can build like a bigger vegetative plant, but we don't harvest vegetation. So foliarly, you won't. I'm not able to get a plant to yield higher just from that. Weather might affect that, with regards to how much flowers and pots that you're going to abort, but you're not foliarly going to increase. You're not going to get a plant to go higher on yield just by spraying stuff over it. And then iron and manganese, that is one of the two big things that you have to give a lot of attention to that as well, especially iron. So I will add V2 to V3 that stage. I will go in with iron, even if I don't have any issues with my iron. But the iron and the fungicide at V2 that keeps my cotyledons on for me as well. And even manganese, if you're on the lower side on manganese and some stress, definitely that is that helps to get in a cloudy weather for me to make sure that the photosynthesis is completely effective. Yeah. I try to just use boron and fungicides. That's the only thing that I want to put over my beans if I have to go over it. Yeah. And I should always tell the guys here as well. You can try and keep a 100 bushel crop at 100 bushels, but you're not going to make a 30 into a 50. If you miss that window at planting, you're not gonna improve it. Maybe if you've got some bugs in the jug or some snake oil, we can send you some here from South Africa with guys making copious amounts of claims, but sorry, they're not gonna work. So my in-furrow mix that I've been using for the last 3-4 years, that's been giving me good results. This year again, I've put down this, so I've used 150 liters of water. Then I've put down 4.5 liters of humics in furrow. So the humics that we have here also, they're actually quite shit. I just think they throw some stuff in a jug and they'll just call it humics or so. But it's not. It's better than nothing, but it's not the quality of humics that I know that you guys have. Yeah. And then I'll go with 3 liters of Como as well in furrow. I won't go without the cobalt and molybdenum. I've got a label of that Como that shows the amount of active or the composition of it. I just have to look for it. I don't know where it is now. I forgot about that. And then I go with some P205. It's a product from Stoller that I can get. And then I add a liter of sulfur soil. That sulfur is really important to help with the branching. If I run some no sulfur in furrow, I do not get those high amount of lateral branches that I want to see. And then the zinc. So now I know zinc will give you some really good vegetative growth if you go to high on zinc. But in furrow for me, I do plant a bit deeper. I'm going to talk about a bit deeper planting, but that zinc helps those beans, help me get those beans up, from a bit of deeper, the bit deeper planting that I do. And then in furrow as well, I put down some rhizobium. It's got like the package that I use is it's got the rhizobium in with a bioprotector, some bacillus and trichoderma. But if I have to take out something, it will be the trichoderma. I've had some issues with that in the past, but yeah, that might go in some or on some of the earlier planting beans. Then my seed treatments. So Bioforge from Stoller. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Sorry, Jerry Stoller, if I fuck it up. But that's like the silver bullet for me to get yield expression from those seeds, mixed with that Umix, the Umix in furrow and the Bioforge on the seed. On all my trees that I plant, I use Bioforge. If I take out the Bioforge, I'm not getting to over 1,000 pots of plant. So there's definitely something from the Bioforge that helps me to get a genetic expression from them. So yeah, then I use on-seed inoculant as well, Rhizobium again. And then if I have to go to early planting, I'll put down some fungicides, whether it's biological or chemical. But April and Celeste, it will rob yield. Today we've harvested a plot today, and there was like 1.2 tons per hectare less on the April and Celeste, where we put that on the seeds. But if I have to plant really early, I'll go out with April and Celeste if I have to, just to help with some to keep them healthy. But then I'll know there's going to be some yield penalty for me. So it's like a choose your evil approach. If I have to get some fields that I do have to plant before they get to wet, I will go that route. But otherwise, if I have to grow, if I'm going to aim for really high yields, I'll just wait for a bit better weather, maybe a week later, and just go without April Celeste. Then any treatments, I think that has to go on the seed. SDS is something that we luckily do not have. That's quite common. I've had it once on a small field, and then I just dropped that variety. And this year there was another variety from another farmer, and luckily not close to me. But I think in future that's something that I will, add just to help SDS suppress that. And other diseases, we've got like the bacteria, not charcoal rot. That's a problem, yeah. So and that's on the seed is where I can get some fungicides on just to help with the charcoal rot. And then, and then just my order, I always put down the Rhizobium first, the biologicals, and then the Bioforge. And then I don't make those seeds too wet. So I stick to a 4.5 millimeters of the weight mix per kilogram of seed that I'm treating. And then, yeah, with seed treatments, I have found that you can push them too hard, like the one on the right. You can even see there was some mold down at the bottom, growing from what I've tried on there. So yeah, there's definitely a limit, that of you can try and push a bean too hard. It did germinate, but it will kick you in the nuts somewhere down the line. And then I think seed and population, seed vigor and the management approach you're going to have, I think goes hand in hand. So the photo that I've put down there, same variety, just from a lower population on the left-hand side was a really low population, and then on the right-hand side was, to the upper scale of what too high of a population is. So for me, when it comes to population, the planting depth and the emergence I think is one of the things that is really crucial for the success. You want to get them to emerge evenly, and the spacing is, you need to singulate them. You need to get them up at the same time. Just like you singulate corn and get like a picket fence, just getting those beans to emerge at the same time and the good spacing to make sure you should try and aim to get the same amount of branches from every bean. Every one of them should have the same amount of branches, and they should emerge at the same time so that they can be at the same stages, so that they can react the same to any fungicides or anything that you might put over them. I think beans, when they emerge, they've got like, or even before they emerge, they've got like small little hand radios, and the one will call the neighbor and just ask him, where are you at? And he'll say, I'm too close to you. It's like, fuck it, I'm not going to be happy with you. You're a bad neighbor, so I won't produce. So that's where I think just getting the spacing and that pace, I've seen that works. And then I see that planting a bit deeper. I think you need to plant a bit deeper than what you've been planting normally. Keep it at the same depth as what you're doing corn, or even a bit deeper. There's definitely stacking nodes from planting a bit deeper. I've got a big trial this year that I've done, and definitely the bit deeper planting helps a lot. But if you want to plant a bit deeper, you have to make sure that the vigor that you're getting out of the seed that you have has got high vigor. So let me just add that as well. Here in South Africa, we are allowed to do farmer-safe seeds. So we can keep our seeds, and that makes a big difference, because in the last 5 years, all the farmer-safe seed that I've had has outperformed all the new seeds just on germination alone. So I think if you've got poor quality, low vigor seed, don't go and try and plant them too deep. Then it's just rather plant them shallower. But deeper planting is one of those things that's also, it should make a light come on, because that's where, stacking those nodes, keeping those plants from lodging. You can keep your plants shorter by just going in with a bit shallower planting. And you should plant them deep enough so that you should lose a few. You might get one not up, but it shouldn't be every second one. Then they're not too deep. But on longer maturities, the longer maturities for us here, everything longer than a 5.3, if I lose more on them, I don't matter, because they've got just so much more potential to compensate. But the deeper planting is definitely one of the things that I think needs to change. Population-wise, so this is the populations. I've written down here what those are. I think it's 60 to 80,000 on the lower end of the spectrum. So this is 8 years worth of yield data that I've got. And the sweet spot for me is between 125 to 175,000. So that is about, I think, 60,000 plants per acre. On a maturity group 4.7 to 5.3. That's the curve that's how it looks. And I even played with some variable rate on the beans, but the beans will compensate in such a way you have to do like a 100,000 jump almost to get like a really big reaction. So variable rate on beans, for me, I think there's better ways to try and make yield or save seeds from that. I personally think that 200,000, I think 80 or 90,000, that is like the sweet spot for, I think, anywhere you're going to plant beans, any maturity group. So population, a high population, that'll be 120 and higher thousand seeds per acre. If you go to a high population and you get lodging, then you definitely need to burn them back, or you need to plant a bit deeper. That's definitely going to help you with the vegetative growth. A high population, don't help them with any foliar stuff. Just burn them back. So with burning back, well, we don't have too much product here to use. So I use good old 2,4-D. I burn them with 2,4-D at earlier stages. If I can get, I think the V4 to V6, depending on weather, burn them back there with 2,4-D and get them to branch firstly, and just set them back enough so that they won't get out too much vegetatively. That helps a lot for me, especially on the longer maturities that's prone to grow too much. You spray them, you go on vacation for 2 weeks, and then you come back and you look at them again, because they do look shitty when you spray them. If you get yellowing down on the canopy, then you're losing yield because you're not getting sun into the canopy. If you take out a few plants and you look at the top part of the plant and the bottom part of the plant, you should have an equal distribution on the amount of nodes that's carrying soybeans and pods. If you've got too much on the top, those beans were fighting for sunlight. That's like, it's a no-brainer. If you open up that field in the bottom half, you're going to see yellow leaves. If you get yellow leaves in the bottom half, population is too high. You're not getting any sunlight down there. So that's why they're fighting to grow higher, because each and every one of them wants to be better than the one next to them. So they want to grow, but they need to catch sun so that they can reproduce. So on higher populations, usually shorter maturity groups is the way to go. But I think with the new genetics, that might not be the case. But if you're planting later, then you have to, you need to bump up the population. That's just to catch more sunlight then. But I won't go like higher than 120, because I feel 120,000 seeds per acre is already too way high on the higher side, population-wise for us here. And then with beans and corn, if you want to go to a higher potential, you need, or corn, you just bump up the population. With beans, it's the other way around. On lower producing or lower potential, you need to put down a higher population. Where on your lower populations, you take that and you plant your high yielding stuff on the lower high yields, low population. That's the way it works. Yeah. On lower populations, that's 120 and way less. 120, I shouldn't have put it up there. I should have actually put down there maybe 80 to 90,000 and lower. 60,000 is my sweet spot for all my high yielding beans. So for me, high yielding is everything above 80 bushels and up. That's where I'm getting the most yield out of. But not all varieties should be planted that low. As a rule of thumb, what I do is, if you take a cell phone, I just need to go back one. Just want to move this away. So if I take my cell phone, doesn't matter to what row width I'm at, I need to get one seed on this side and one seed. I need to space my cell phone between those two seeds. Then I know that I'm quite happy with the spacing that I've got. Like 2 inches. That's usually the width of a cell phone now. But if you're going too low and the branches, then you'll start to get branches to break off. So then you have to bump it up again. Some varieties they can't carry those branches because they can't take up, the calcium. High calcium levels also, if you need to get your calcium up, that helps a lot with getting those plants to support those branches. And then if you're going to a lower population, you have to get hard germination from those seeds, and that's where the zinc helps me. I even run a foliar zinc at the end of the season before I harvest my farmer safe seeds. And that extra zinc from those seeds actually helps me to improve my germination and vigor quite a lot. Also in a low population, I don't try to help them only with foliar. I just try to maintain those plants at the population where they are and keep to those levels, because those plants, even though they start out looking like you want to replant them, but they will make up for it in yield from the amount of pods they will and flowers that they will set, because a thicker stem will suck up more nutrients out of the soil. Yeah, and then varieties with sharper leaves or pointy leaves. I don't know what the narrow leaves or what the correct term would be, but usually on lower populations, that's also one of the things for me on the lower population, shorter maturity groups. That's something that I prefer, narrower leaves. Usually a lot of guys, I will plant longer maturities on lower populations, which might be a good decision, but it's not always the case. If you plant a long maturity, low population, it'll just grow vegetative as well. And yeah, maturity, you shouldn't pair your maturity, your planting variety to a maturity group. You should rather get to a specific, the correct variety, and not necessarily a maturity group. Yeah, like I said, the high yields, the high yielding fields, you need to back down on population. But yeah, lower population does need a bit more, not management, but you need to, have to have an eye on them the whole time, insect-wise, just to make sure you don't go from a 60 or 80,000 population down to a 40 or a 50,000. I have gotten really good potential, even still high yields, 100% potential from even lower than that. But that was everything has to happen correctly. Then if you get hail, then then you might be not getting to the maximum yield. Yeah, and then the planting date. This is a photo. If I show it to anyone or for everyone I show it to them, it's like, that's like the cheapest investment that you have with the highest ROI. Just plant those beans early. Get your corn planter ready to plant and all of that. And before you hit the ground with the corn planter, just change out the soybeans and quickly plant a few soybeans, because those two plants, there's just the only difference between them is planting date. So I'd rather go with the one on the left than trying to get the one on the right, because the one on the left, you can do nothing to it. It's going to out yield the one on the right, even if you throw the kitchen sink at it with lots of fish piss, like I've dubbed it here in South Africa. Then the planting process, that's the planters that we plant with. Terry, just take note, there's no green planters. We have some green paint on a planter, but there's no green planters. Yeah, so
you're lost.
those are well, we'll keep the green planters for corn then. So, but yeah, so I've that's all planters that I've planted with. So the one down left and top right, that's actually that we use here in South Africa for striptil. We put down our fertilizers in the 0x3 with that, with those units. Top left, Apache, I don't know if you know that. Apaches, they're from South America. They are at 20-inch narrow row spacings. Down right, well, the Fendt Momentum, one of the planters that won't be making it back to my farm, had a lot of issues with it. And then the one in the middle, that center one, that's the one that a lot of yield comes from. The case early riser. So with regard to a planting process, there's always this is stuff that every precision planting dealer or everyone's going to tell you. You have to make sure the plant is set up correctly, depth and all of that. So yeah, that is really important. Well, if it's an early riser and it's red, you already got a few extra bushels. So not because it's red, but you know why? The closing system on a planter, beans are really full of shit if you put them in the ground and you're not going to get them up. So the closing system that early riser has just makes it easier for you to plant those seeds at a bit deeper depth and get them up, in a way that you still have a decent stand, and they will emerge really at the same time. And not only on an early riser, so if you've got like furrow force from precision planting or whichever closing system you have, all of those, the first few points, everybody make sure their cutting coulters and everything is correctly and depths are right. But when it comes to beans, if you put them in the soil, you need to treat them like babies, and you have to be nice and gentle on them with a closing system. If your closing system isn't correct, if they have to expend some energy from those cotyledons just to break the ground, then you're losing out on potential. So if you can plant a bit deeper and you can get the closing system just to do as nice of a soft job as to getting them up nice and in a way that they don't use energy, then that's where you're going to win quite a lot of yield. And then for me, managing it then from emergence up until harvest. So IDC, iron deficiency sclerosis, if you have it or if you don't have it, certain varieties here, South American varieties, they will show IDC and they will be iron deficient. So that's why I run iron at V2 with a fungicide, even if my iron is not an issue, and that helped quite a lot, to help those bean plants to express themselves and make sure that I'm getting to the uppermost part of what my yield potential might be. Then with a fungicide at V2, V3, I use Priaxor. That's only because we've got Priaxor now here. We don't have all the new stuff yet, but also just to get those beans to stress a bit less, even if they do look happy. Even less stress is no stress is the best. Yeah. Then I tissue sample first. Usually, first samples will go in at V3, and then R1, R2, and then at R5. That's the three big times that I will. I won't miss that. I will even add some more tissues in between, but that's three stages that I try to give a lot of attention to. Then glyphosate and manganese. If you spray glyphosate on a soybean plant, those plants will just go and stand still for a few days to metabolize, the Roundup with the manganese being tied up. So in the photosynthesis process, sorry, I can't pronounce that photosynthesis term correctly, but if you lose out 3 to 4 or 5 days, how long ever those beans are going to try and fight to get that out of the system. If you bump up that manganese just to overcome that, that also makes like a big difference. I want to say something on glyphosate. I'm going to do that on the end when I get to the herbicides. So yeah, and then managing those plants, checking the cotyledons all the way. They need to stay on as long as possible. That's like the best tissue test that you have. That's like a ref counter. If it drops down, you can't. If they go off, something cause your bean to use the energy that's stored in them. You have to address that from the info. That's where I've got the biggest changes made to keep my cotyledons on for as long as possible. That I got from fine-tuning my info approach that I have. So those cotyledons, they are really, really important. They will indicate to you where maybe your limiting factor is going to be, what's keeping you from, getting yield out of your beans or getting a higher yield. I will go in with a fungicide at R1. I prefer Priaxor now because that or even headline amp, that's what we have available. Preaxor works quite good. And then I will always put down a shot of boron with it if I have to go through with a fungicide. And then the fungicide throughout the season, those beans need to be green and healthy. If there's anything on your leaves, you're losing photosynthesis, you're losing sugars, you're not gonna get really big seeds. I've got plants now that we've cut, the last ones of them today. Some of my better yielding beans that I've had, those plants were still like green. It smells like if you're cutting silage behind the combine. But those beans are so big, we will take a truck that will usually load like 12 to 13 tons. They weigh 14.5 tons now because of the bigger seed weight. Those plants were they were healthy. They didn't have any sickness to them, any foliar diseases. So the sunlight they caught up, they just put that with a fertility, into big seeds. Those big seeds, they give good yield, yeah. And then you have to check and spray for insects. Insects will do a lot of damage, and that's like the one or two, not from just losing one or two pods or flowers maybe on a plant. You're gonna lose flowers and pods. Insects will give you some flowers and pods that you will physically see, but if a plant gets injured from an insect, it'll throw off abort more pods and flowers than you might know. So insects will do. We only have intactas now, so bollworms and stink bugs and stuff like that. We have to still control it, with the insecticide. And if you leave them, they will do more damage than just the 1 or 2 or 3 bushels that most guys might say. It might be indirectly more than that. If you've got like an early infestation from insects, it's going to affect the seed weight on the end, because if that plant gets stressed or punctured, it's going to go into stress, and it's like a woman. You stress a woman up, she's not going to perform like she should. And then herbicides. So I put a question mark next to herbicides. That is one of the biggest yield limiting things, I think, on beans. I'm not sure what type of actives that you're using there in the US, but what I found is that certain varieties don't like certain modes of actions. So what I do is in my trials, I'll plant the trials in like a north-south, and then I'll spray different herbicides, east-west over those variety trials. And it's quite alarming for me to see what yield penalty there is from herbicides. You can lose 50% of a potential on a variety if you're not using the correct herbicide, or if that variety isn't tolerated to that herbicide. So what I've done the past few years is I've went with a cover crop or even with wheat, where I'll plant wheat, and then I will just go and plant soybeans into that wheat without using any herbicide at all, especially on the more sandier soils. And as soon as I start to take out herbicides from the program over the beans, I'm not stressing those beans. The cotyledons are staying on longer, and those beans just out yield anything that has had herbicides by about 50%. You can do a strip tile next to it. I'll send you a pin drop where I'm staying at, or Kevin can bring you, I can show you that. So herbicides is one of those things that got a big influence on what the type of bean, the theoretical potential that it's going to set up when it gets up. It has to metabolize any herbicides that it comes into contact with or gets taken up in the soil solution. What I do, if I have to put down a herbicide, I will go out with a sprayer, a week or 2 before I have to plant. So yeah, there's still going to be some herbicides in the soil, but if there's a rain event coming through, the herbicides start to, leach into the ground, and it starts to it's diluted into the soils. Yeah, so maybe I'm just it's one of those catch-22 things, maybe, but herbicides can really hit you in the nuts if you're spraying them over the beans. So they will rob energy from those cotyledons. And then with Roundup, so I'm a Bayer guy. I like my Roundup Power Max. I've done trials even on Roundup, glyphosate, and glyphosate. Not all glyphosate, also because of the type of salt that they use in the glyphosate, will affect the stress that you're putting out on that plant. I'm usually not the guy that shows fingers, so I'm not going to say touchdown from Syngenta is shit, but I won't spray touchdown from Syngenta. We've also seen like 20 to 25% yield penalties from just
Really good
down from Syngenta, so I think the herbicides is something that you also need to give a lot of attention to. You have to find a good herbicide program for the variety that you're planting. In South America, they've got like, I don't know, maybe in the US you have it, but the seed companies, they can tell you, but this variety is more, you can use this and this herbicides over them. They won't be affected as much. But even though, there's all the companies, because they want to sell you herbicides, so they won't actually tell you 100%. But I know in South America, they've got some tolerance ratings for certain herbicides for certain varieties. So yeah, that is a big thing on the herbicides. Yeah. So then this is the tissue levels that I'm trying to. I don't want to say I aim for that on a bean, because if you get the soil fertility right at planting, that is where you should get to. So the table on top. So these are also done in the South African, also at the Envirotech lab. I would like to send some tissues to some other labs in the US as well, just to start to get a comparative database out of that, to see if our laboratories, the labs we have with the extraction methods that they do use, to get to the levels, if they do differ in a way. I have thought about one of the things is maybe the boron. I think that maybe our labs might be a bit lower on boron than what the US labs is, but yeah, so that's also something that I would like to mention. So yeah, there's the V3, R2, R5, the ones on top. So that is where I aim for. If I can get that into my plants are at that, then I'm happy. Then I know I just need to manage the stress on them, because they will produce sugars, and sugars will create pods and seed weight. So I'm happy with that's where the levels that I'm looking at. If I'm low on something, I will try and address that through the soil or with the infaro. If I'm off a bit, I would try, maybe on potassium, try some potassium and put it up. But I think I can only maintain potassium levels. I can't get them to bump up quite a lot. So yeah, and then those two, the big column at the bottom, the long one with the dark blue, that is the last year and this year's soy trees, my two big record trees that I've had. So that's the levels that they ended up at. So now I know for a fact that those levels are levels that I should aim for, because those trees get a lot of, they've got a lot of pods on them. So I try to minimize the stress on them. And so the levels that's down there on that table, that is, and that almost correlates with some of, with the levels on top that I've been building up by myself over the last few years. So yeah, the ones that are there in the bottom, that's from my soy trees, the big ones. Things on there that I think I might that I do have to get up is definitely the sulfur. Sulfur is a big problem for me, or a limiting thing. And then the copper. Copper also. I think that might also go up a bit. I'd like to get that up also to help just with natural immunity to diseases. I hope I'm explaining and interpreting it the way that I want to get it out. Yeah. So potassium. I've seen guys with potassium at 3% on their beans, but those beans will then also they will grow so high vegetatively. I don't know why. I just need to end up. If I can end at the back at 2% on potassium, then I know. I think I've got something right, and then usually that's where the yields really get high. Calcium is one of those things. It'll, I think most of you have seen that. You can start down low. It'll just pick up throughout the season. On the other stuff, phosphorus, also phosphorus. Those levels, I just use it like a map. If the cotyledons will fall off, I'll take a tissue sample and to see if there's any big changes or anything that's abnormal to what the levels are that I do have, and then I'll just try and correct that in the next season. So yeah, I think that's about it. There is one of that. I think last year soy tree was the first photo that I've got here on my computer when I did the presentation. So yeah, beans have got a lot of potential. You can't. My soy trees, I'm at that stage where I don't apply anything onto them. I just feed them through the soil. Soil biology needs to feed those plants. I've gone out and I've sprayed those trees. The one field I took like a quarter of a hectare of them, and I threw the whole kitchen sink at them. I couldn't get to 1,000 pots on them. So beans. When going back to that first slide I shown, with how to grow, big beans or improve your yields with that big board. It can be a quite difficult thing to try and understand, but I think if I have to put out a few main things, you have to get your soil biology active, or not active. You have to have healthier soils to be able to get fertility into the plant. You have to get your populations down. You can't feed a pivot with a 1-inch mother line. The bigger the stems are, the more fertility you get into the plant, and the more fertility you can, nutrients you can get into those seeds. Yeah. Also, with a lower population, you're gonna get more sunlight down into the canopy. So you're not gonna get plants that's gonna go too high up, grow too much vegetatively, and they will only set pods on the top, the top part of the soybeans. You don't want that. You want the whole plant from the bottom to the top to carry pods. My soy trees, I get the most amount of pods from the first and second and third nodes, the branches that they have from the bottom. That's where a lot of energy will go into in a plant if you're at the right population. So if you do the ideal will be if you can plant the high population and get all of them to put out 2,000 pots. That will be, but that's not going to happen because we're fighting sunlight, and you can only burn them back so much. Yeah? So you have to back down on your population, and then anything you can do to maximize the amount of sunlight and the quality of sunlight that's hitting the leaves, and not just the leaves, because you have to get them into the canopy. A variety that's got a narrow leaf, you'll get more sunlight into the leaf, into the canopy and the bottom canopy, and better air movement, which is going to be better for any diseases that might want to develop down there. So a narrower leaf also, the narrower the leaf is, the shorter the path of sugar movement is going to be to get down to where the fruiting nodes are. Also, and then, well, it's beans. You just have to plant them with the right way around, with a red planter. You know, that's like I think one of the most important things. Yeah. So, well, I think with that, I hope I haven't spoken too much shit. So I think it might be time for questions now, if there's any questions.
You had Greg in Kansas ask, do you know anything about irrigation?
Oh, well, I've only started out with irrigated beans this year. I've got an irrigated farm last season, so it's my first season on that. I think with irrigation-wise, irrigation is a tool that you can use through the reproductive stages, also just to help, fill up the soil capacity, to make sure you've got enough moisture in the soil. And then also, if you can cool down those plants, heat stress is one of the biggest things you have to manage. That's like the biggest robbing thing that robs you from flowers being produced and pots being set. So if you can, you should use the water, to manage heat stress on those beans through R1 to R3 stages. I think that is where that's what I'm going to do. Where I'm seeing, the biggest thing that I'm going to use the irrigation. I won't say it's going to be because I can turn on the water whenever it gets dry. That might work as well, but I think if you can manage the heat stress on beans, that will help out quite a lot.
Donnie, got a question on your sulfur. Would you get the same results running it with a 2x2 instead of in furrow or not?
Well, I think if I can put it down on a 2x2, I might go to a bit higher rate. But at the moment, for me, just from my application wise, I'm putting it down in my in furrow.
Yeah. That I looked that up. That's an elemental sulfur, right? That you're using?
I think so. Yeah.
So you're applying that for later in the season application, I'm guessing, right?
Well, and also, well, I do know that in the bioforge there's also, I think, a bit of sulfur in there, and that sulfur also helps to, as soon as the sulfur levels go up, the amount of branching I see goes up as well. So some of that sulfur is needed early in the season as well, to get those plants to get the branching starting from below the cotyledons and not just over on top on the top side.
Thank you.
Hey, Donnie.
Yes.
This is Craig from Minnesota. On your tissue test, I noticed sodium levels being in the 10, 15, that range there. We're kind of used to seeing 0, or trying to keep it down to it. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Well, that is, I've never seen, a tissue test with 0 on it here in South Africa. So I don't know how or why they, how the extraction is on that. But, we've seen tests going up to like 115 to 120, on certain tissue results. So I don't know if it's the way or how they test it, that I would also like to prefer to see it at 0. 0 would be best, but that is how we get it from our labs.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned the weight of your yield, how it increased in the tonnage on your trucks. The plant I'm looking at here, we talk a lot about 3 bean pods, 4 bean pods. What are you typically seeing on a tree like that? How many beans in a pod?
Well, mostly it'll be 4 bean, 3 and 4 bean pods, with 4 beans usually just edging out the 3 beans. Almost 0, 1. I think there might be one pod, 1 or 2 pod beans. I haven't gotten a 5 bean pod on a soy tree, but mostly it'll be 4 bean pods and 3 bean pods. The stress management on those beans, I do cool them down with some water, and that helps a lot, I think getting me to those 3 and 4 bean pods.
Thank you.
That's just the way it grows up. Donnie, I'm curious, when we was there, how many pods was on the one there in your garden?
You'll have to go. You have to phone Granny and ask her to take it out and go and have a look. She might shoot me if I go there. Now, well, I must tell you, I'm considering doing. What is that? The guy from South America, Nelson Capes. I don't know if any of you have heard about Nelson Capes. So he grows beans under growth lights. So I want to try and do that next year as well, because those guys, they're going up to 13,000 pods on a plant, So, but they will plant that. They've got I think it's the same growing. I want to find out about what the spectrum is, but they'll put one on either side of that plant, and then they will the spectrum of light going down on that. So they will actually manage day length. I think on that. So that's something I think I want to try and do. I want to get myself a nice section of soil somewhere here close to Granny and ask her to turn on some growing lights that instead of growing roses and stuff like that.
Donnie, have you tried any of the PGRs, the cytokines, the auxins? Have tried any of those?
Well, I have used some of Stolar's PGRs and like that, but beans being so they're quite touchy when you get to hormones. If you throw out a hormone quickly, it'll just backfire quickly on you. If you can get, like a kelp with that's got a lot of cytokinin in it, that is supposed to help, with flow retention if you apply it at certain stages. But I haven't been able to get that. I think the hormones in the soybean plants, they can be so in such a way that you can manipulate them in the wrong direction quite easily. So I have played with some PGRs, but I'm not getting consistent results out of it. I think it has to be like a really, really good timing thing on PGRs, to get the most out of them.
What about using nitrogen more near the end of the season? Do you add any nitrogen at all?
Well, I will add some nitrogen if I have to put out some P and K. I have put out nitrogen on some high-yielding beans with sulfur. I do go add some sulfur with that nitrogen, but it's also I'm not getting consistent results out of it, because I think under irrigation, maybe if I can wash it in at consistently just before R1, I think that's something that I am going to try. But dry land, I have not been getting enough consistent data out of it to say that it's that I'm happy, with that approach. Sorry, just excuse me. I just want to get these dogs. They're barking a bit here.
You know, Kevin, there's quite a few similarities on his tissue numbers and that 150 bushel that you raised a couple years back. There are some differences, but quite a few are right in that same ballpark as what you
Yeah,
back
I
then.
mean, yeah, we were kind of looking at them ourselves there. There is a lot in common in them. Very interesting. Being 8,000 miles away, and you know, he's in the land of milk and honey over there in South Africa.
What kind of temperatures are you working with, say from flowering to the end? What kind of ranges?
I'll have to. I'm going to give them to you in Celsius. I
Oh,
don't have my
boy.
converter closer now. Yeah, so so 28. We go from 26 to 28 degrees is what we usually get Celsius. What we have to work with, but in drier years, hot years, we can go up to 31, 32 degrees. So we don't get, there are hot parts in South Africa that'll go up to 33 degrees Celsius, even higher. But when you go to those areas, they don't grow soybeans because the heat will just kill those beans. And usually those hot areas are also too dry for soybean production. But ideally here for us in the eastern parts, 26 to 28 degrees is like what we're used to work with or what we're getting.
Kevin, you got any clue what that converts to? Or Joe?
Sorry, let me just, I'm going to see if I can quickly get a
Hey,
converter
Greg.
here.
Craig, it's 82 degrees Fahrenheit.
82 Fahrenheit.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
hit that for like 4 minutes in South Dakota. So,
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah, we hit it sometime by 10 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, Kevin, I see you got Matt there. Has the breeding of the soybeans, this is, I guess, posed toward Matt. This narrow leaf that some of the Asgrows do have, but we did plant some group fours several years ago that just had mammoth big leaves on them, and I know that was deterrent to getting pods at the bottom of the plant. So is there a push toward breeding for the narrow leaves, I guess is my big question.
Yeah, that's a good question, Terry. Breeders don't specifically look at the leaf structure. I mean, obviously they're just planting and looking at final yields. Those really narrow leaf products that were really good in the past, those are now parents of products we're using today. Products like 36X6 was a really big bean for Asgrow. It's a big line today, and a lot of the genetics we're using on the Extend Flex line in that maturity.
Well, I've been advocate of the narrow leaf bean for a long time, so just keep those coming. And I think Donnie's also he's basically said that the narrow leaf beans, but there are some bean cultivars out there, as you know, that's got those great big massive ones, and I've just never been a fan of them. So
I have to add with the new Roundup Ready 2s that we're only getting now and the Intactas. So for us, the base genetics comes out of South America, and the Don Mario's does a really good job here for us. And all the last year, out of all the Intactas, I was fortunate enough to be one of the first farmers to plant Intactas. And out of all those varieties that they brought in, all the narrow leaf varieties out yielded everything with bigger, rounder leaves.
Donnie, you mentioned earlier, almost in the beginning, that it's crucial to get the nutrients from the soil into the plant as opposed to foliars. And you have to have a really good functioning biological system. What are you using in South America or South Africa to determine, okay, my biology is alive and cooking, it's doing well, or I need to improve on the biology so I can get more nutrients from the soil into the plant? through biologicals?
Yeah, well, so we don't have like too much soil tests that we can do on that shows soil health. So we do have like some we can do a Haney test the last few years over here, but for us it's more like by physically seeing what we're getting done by planting cover crops and using some of the the humic products that we do have. So the longer we're building on the soil health, through cover crops and manure applications, and just seeing, like the physical part of soil biology, earthworm-wise and like that, as we're improving that, and that the biological activity is getting higher, then we know we've got, that's like the measurement that we have on what a good soil is for us, a healthy soil.
So
I must also
your
say,
better numbers on your tissue test would more or less reflect the biological health. The better the numbers, the healthier soil, that type of reasoning.
yeah, definitely are. Well, that's what if I have to say how we interpret it. I hope that's a correct term. Yeah. And also, with just with regards to, I don't want to foliar feed any beans. Also, the products that we do have, it's really, you'll have a good laugh. If you want to have a joke, I'll send you some of our products. So I think there might be certain, products maybe available for somewhere in the world, like in the US, that might, help you to manipulate or feed a bean through the tissues. But even if I can get a really good product, I'll still rather just feed them through the soil.
So when you're adding nutrients during the year, I thought I heard you say if I need P or K or sulfur or boron, is that going on then with an irrigation system? And then
yeah, so if I have to put down, like POK or something like that, it'll be, before planting season. I don't like to ban anything anymore. So it will be, in the off season, usually when we finish the harvest of the corn. If we have to do some liming, then we'll just spread some. I prefer to put down manure and get some, nutrition out of the manure or some compost that we have.
Okay, I just misunderstood one of your comments. I thought you had dry land and fertigation, and you were adding something during the season. That you were
no.
Okay,
no, not
gotcha.
Yet.
Okay.
Any more questions, guys?
Did you get your results back yet, Danie?
Which ones? The one that's saying I'm mad. I'm waiting on them. Well, the combine just pulled in. That's why the dogs were barking. So I'll just have to go and ask for the ticket. I haven't gotten anything on the phone yet, so I'll just ask for the, hopefully for the scale ticket now.
Good deal.
Oh, so you probably, I don't know, in pounds, test weight on your soybeans. Do you all sell 60-pound test weight beans? Is that a bushel in South Africa also?
Well, I'll have to do that conversion to see, how many, because we get like a, what they call it, a hectoliter rating. So I'll do the conversion on that, find out, just see how much that, or I'll try and convert it to get it to the units that you have for comparison.
Okay.
But we only get paid on final weight.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, guys, you got any questions? Now's the time to ask.
I can teach you some really difficult Afrikaans words, and Kevin can teach you some other Afrikaans words.
But there's one I can't say. At least, well, in America, I could probably say it, get by with it, but
Probably.
Probably not.
Well, I guess that's it, Donnie. We appreciate it and keep me posted when you find out how you did. As long as it's better than 122.
It might be a 121.99, but we'll round it off then.
Hey, thanks, Dane. Thanks,
Thank
Donnie.
you, Donnie.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Donnie.
it.
Yeah, no
Yeah,
pleasure.
all right, thank you so
Okay.
much.